I never imagined I'd hear my grandmother's voice again after she passed away. But there she was, speaking clearly through the lawyer's computer speakers, destroying my sister's claims to her entire estate. The recording that changed everything wasn't supposed to exist, and Sarah made sure of that. Or at least, she thought she did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The mahogany conference table in Mr. Harrison's law office seemed to stretch endlessly between my sister Sarah and me. At 32, I'd spent the last decade building my own successful consulting business, deliberately staying away from family drama. The irony wasn't lost on me. My expertise lay in helping corporations navigate complex transitions and disputes. Yet here I was, unable to avoid the very thing I'd worked so hard to escape in my personal life. Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Harrison, addressed me, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the afternoon light. I understand you're contesting your sister's claim to your grandmother's estate. His tone was neutral, professional, the voice of someone who'd mediated countless family disputes. Behind him, Boston's financial district sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows, a fitting backdrop for what was about to unfold. I straightened, in my leather chair, acutely aware of Sarah's glare from across the table. Yes, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I have reason to believe my grandmother's will has been tampered with. The words hung heavy in the air, carrying the weight of months of suspicion and years of complicated family history. Sarah's manicured hand slammed against the table, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light, a gift from Grandma Eleanor. Last Christmas, one of many lavish presents she'd received since moving into the mansion. This is ridiculous. Grandma Eleanor promised everything to me. She told me specifically, multiple times, that I would inherit the estate. Catherine's just bitter because she was too busy with her precious career to visit Grandma in her final years. The familiar guilt trip, Sarah's specialty. She'd perfected it over the years, wielding family obligations like a weapon, while she remained the devoted granddaughter. Never mind that she'd moved into our grandmother's Victorian mansion 2 years ago, supposedly to take care of her, right after her third failed business venture. The pattern was clear to everyone except, perhaps, Grandma Eleanor herself. A wellness spa that went bankrupt after 6 months, a boutique clothing store that closed owing vendors thousands, and a short-lived event planning company that ended in multiple lawsuits. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, shuffling through the papers before him. Ms. Sarah Reynolds, you've presented a will dated March 15th of this year, 3 months before your grandmother's passing, leaving the entire estate, valued at approximately $28 million, solely to you. Is that correct? His voice remained neutral, but I noticed his eyes lingering on certain documents, particularly the ones bearing notary stamps. Yes, Sarah smiled, smoothing her designer blazer, likely purchased with Grandma's credit card. Grandma Eleanor wanted to ensure her estate went to someone who would preserve her legacy, not sell it off piece by piece. She shot me another pointed look, her perfect veneer masking the desperation I'd begun to recognize in recent months. I took a deep breath, remembering the strange call I'd received from our grandmother's housekeeper, Maria, just 2 weeks ago. The conversation had lasted barely 5 minutes, but it had changed everything. Mr. Harrison, I have evidence suggesting that will may not reflect my grandmother's true wishes. Sarah's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose, but I caught the slight twitch in her left eye, a tell she'd had since childhood, one that appeared only when she felt truly threatened. Evidence? What evidence? You weren't even here. You were too busy flying around the country, closing your precious business deals while I took care of Grandma day and night. The door opened quietly, and Maria entered, carrying a manila envelope. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, her posture straight despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. She'd worked for our grandmother for over 20 years, becoming more family than employee. Sarah's face paled slightly at the sight of her. What is she doing here? She was fired months ago. Fired by you, Sarah, I corrected, watching Maria's hands tremble slightly as she placed the envelope on the table. Not by Grandma Eleanor, and we both know why. Maria stood her ground, though I could see the emotional toll this was taking on her. Miss Catherine, I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was scared and ashamed. Her accent was thick with emotion, her hands clasped tightly together. But Mrs. Eleanor, she was like a mother to me. I cannot let this happen to her final wishes. Mr. Harrison opened the envelope with deliberate care, removing several documents and what appeared to be a small USB drive. The afternoon sun caught its metallic surface, and I watched Sarah's composure crack just slightly at the sight of it. Mrs. Garcia has provided us with some concerning information regarding the circumstances surrounding your grandmother's last months, he stated, his tone carrying a new weight. Sarah's facade cracked further. Whatever she's claiming, she's lying. She's just bitter about being fired for stealing. Maria flinched but stood taller. I never stole anything, Miss Sarah. You know that. You fired me because I refused to play along with your scheme, because I saw what you were doing to Mrs. Eleanor in her final months. Mr. Harrison held up the USB drive, and in that moment, the air seemed to leave the room. This contains an audio recording from Mrs. Eleanor Reynolds' study, dated February 28th of this year. Mrs. Garcia discovered it while cleaning and kept it safe, despite— he glanced at his notes— despite reported threats to her employment and immigration status. The color drained from Sarah's face. What recording? There can't be any recording. I disabled all of Grandma's devices myself, for her own protection, of course. Apparently not all of them, I said quietly, remembering the antique dictaphone our grandmother kept in her desk drawer, a relic from her days as a court reporter. She'd converted it to digital years ago, but kept it as a backup, saying she never trusted computers entirely. Now that distrust might prove to be her final act of justice. Mr. Harrison connected the drive to his computer, his movements deliberate and measured. Before I play this, I should inform both parties that if this recording proves authentic, and our preliminary analysis suggests it is, there may be serious legal consequences to consider. The room fell silent as he pressed play. Through the speakers came the unmistakable voice of our grandmother, Eleanor Reynolds, clear and strong despite her age. What she said next would change everything, not just about the inheritance, but about our family's entire reality. The recording began with the sound of papers shuffling, followed by our grandmother's distinctive voice, still carrying the slight southern lilt from her childhood in Virginia. Testing, testing. Oh good, it's working. Eleanor Reynolds, February 28th, 2024. There was a pause, then a soft sigh that I remembered so well from my childhood, the sound she made when preparing to say something important. I need to record this while my mind is clear. Sarah's been increasing my medication again, claiming it's what Dr. Matthews prescribed. But Maria helped me check with the pharmacy yesterday. The dosages are all wrong. My grandmother's voice grew stronger, more determined. I may be old, but I'm not senile. I see what's happening now, though it breaks my heart to admit it. Sarah shifted in her chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. Mr. Harrison remained perfectly still, his eyes focused on his computer screen as the recording continued. I've spent my entire life building this estate. James and I worked too hard to see it destroyed by greed. The mention of my grandfather sent a pang through my chest. He'd passed away 5 years ago, leaving Grandma Eleanor to manage their considerable investments alone. Catherine, my dear, if you're hearing this, I owe you an apology. You were right about Sarah's intentions when she moved in. I was just too blind to see it. I felt tears threatening but held them back. 2 years ago, I'd tried to warn our grandmother about Sarah's pattern of financial manipulation, but she'd dismissed my concerns as jealousy over Sarah's decision. to help the family while I focused on my career. The new will Sarah had me sign last week. It's not valid. I signed it under duress. She's been isolating me, controlling my medications, monitoring my phone calls. The real will is with my old friend, Judge Marcus Patterson. He's holding it in trust, along with documentation of everything that's happened these past months. Sarah shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is obviously fake. Anyone could have pieced together Grandma's voice from old recordings. I demand an expert analysis. Sit down, Ms. Reynolds. Mr. Harrison's voice carried an edge of authority that made Sarah sink back into her chair. We've already authenticated the recording. Please allow it to finish. Our grandmother's voice continued, growing more resolute. With each word, I've made mistakes in my life, but my biggest one was enabling Sarah's behavior. Catherine tried to maintain boundaries while still showing love. Sarah saw only what she could take. The credit card bills, the mysterious withdrawals from my accounts, the gradual disappearance of your grandfather's coin collection. I know about all of it now. The revelation about our grandfather's coins hit me hard. That collection had been his pride and joy, worth nearly $500,000. Sarah had claimed he'd sold it before his death to fund his medical treatments. I'd always doubted that story, but had no way to prove otherwise. My true will, dated January 15, 2024, reflects my actual wishes. The estate is to be divided differently. The house and 30% of my financial assets will go to the Reynolds Family Foundation, establishing a scholarship fund for young entrepreneurs. Catherine will receive 40%, along with your grandfather's remaining investments. The final 30% will be placed in a trust for Sarah, managed by the Foundation's Board of Trustees, with strict conditions regarding access and usage. Sarah's face contorted with rage. This is all lies. Pure fiction. Catherine must have put Maria up to this, convinced her to plant this fake recording. They're trying to steal what's rightfully mine. The recording isn't finished, Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Harrison said firmly, raising the volume slightly. If Sarah is listening to this, our grandmother's voice had softened, tinged with sadness. Know that I love you, dear, but love without accountability isn't really love at all. It's just enabling. I learned that too late with you, and I'm sorry for that. The trust isn't a punishment. It's a chance for you to break this cycle, to become the person I know you can be. Tears were streaming down Maria's face now. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key. Mrs. Eleanor gave this to me 3 days before the end. It opens her private safe in the library, the one behind the portrait of Mr. James. Miss Sarah doesn't know about it. Inside, there's evidence of everything. The altered medication bottles, bank statements, photos of the missing coins in her room. Sarah lunged across the table, reaching for the key, but Mr. Harrison was faster. He pressed a button on his desk, and 2 security officers entered immediately. Ms. Sarah Reynolds, in light of this evidence and the recording's authentication, I'm obligated to inform you that there are serious criminal implications to consider. Elderly abuse, financial fraud, coercion. You can't prove anything. Sarah's voice rose to a shriek. This is all circumstantial. My lawyers will tear this apart. Catherine's just jealous because I was there for Grandma while she was off playing businesswoman. I stood slowly looking at my sister, really looking at her. Behind the designer clothes and perfect makeup, I saw something I'd never fully acknowledged before. A desperate emptiness, a void she'd been trying to fill with material possessions and manipulation her entire life. Sarah, I said quietly, Grandma gave you a gift with this recording. A chance to face the truth and change. Please don't throw that away. Miss Catherine is right, Maria added softly. Mrs. Eleanor spent her last months trying to protect you from yourself. The trust, the conditions. She wanted to give you a foundation to build a better life. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. Given the severity of these revelations, I've already contacted the district attorney's office. They'll want to speak with everyone involved. Mrs. Garcia, your testimony and this recording are crucial evidence. Ms. Catherine Reynolds, as the executor named in the January will, you'll need to begin the process of cataloging the estate's assets. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. Our grandmother's final act of love hadn't been the distribution of her wealth. It had been her courage to finally confront the truth, to choose accountability over enabling. As Sarah was escorted from the room, still protesting her innocence, I silently thanked our grandmother for giving us all a chance at healing, even if the path forward would be difficult. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The following days unfolded with methodical precision as the full scope of Sarah's deception came to light. The safe behind grandfather's portrait yielded exactly what Maria had promised: a carefully organized collection of evidence that demonstrated the calculated nature of Sarah's scheme. I stood in the library, surrounded by the familiar scent of old books and leather that had always characterized our grandmother's sanctuary, as the forensic accountant, Ms. Chen, methodically cataloged each piece of evidence. "Your grandmother was remarkably thorough," Ms. Chen observed, examining a series of annotated bank statements. She documented every unauthorized transaction, every suspicious withdrawal. The pattern is unmistakable. She gestured to a spreadsheet she had compiled, showing a systematic draining of accounts that had begun shortly after Sarah moved in. The investigation revealed that Sarah had been operating with increasingly bold efficiency. Beyond the unauthorized use of credit cards and bank accounts, she had systematically sold off valuable pieces from our grandparents' collection of antiques and art, replacing them with convincing replicas. The careful documentation showed transactions totaling nearly $750,000 over the past 2 years alone. Detective Morrison, assigned to investigate the financial crimes aspect of the case, sat across from me in what had once been our grandmother's study. "The premeditation here is striking," he noted, reviewing the evidence. "The medication manipulation particularly concerns us. We've spoken with Dr. Matthews, who confirmed he never authorized the increased dosages. Your sister appears to have been deliberately attempting to impair your grandmother's cognitive function." The weight of this revelation settled heavily in my chest. "She must have been planning this for years," I said, remembering how Sarah had always shown an unusual interest in Grandma Eleanor's financial affairs, even when we were younger. But why didn't Grandma confront her directly? Why the secret? Recording? Maria, who had been invaluable in helping piece together the timeline, spoke up from where she was organizing medical records. Mrs. Eleanor wanted to protect Miss Sarah, even at the end. She believed if she confronted her directly, Miss Sarah would simply become more clever in her deceptions. The recording and evidence were meant to force Miss Sarah to face the consequences of her actions, but in a way that might lead to rehabilitation rather than mere punishment. The district attorney's office had taken a particular interest in the case, recognizing it as an unfortunately perfect example of elder financial abuse. Assistant District Attorney James Patel sat with us, reviewing the mounting evidence. "Your grandmother's foresight in documenting everything transforms this from a potentially complicated he-said-she-said situation into a clear-cut case of systematic fraud and exploitation." I found myself examining a photo album that contained before and after pictures of various valuable items from the house, each annotated with dates and detailed notes in our grandmother's precise handwriting. She was building a case all along, wasn't she? Even while appearing to be under Sarah's control? "Your grandmother was remarkable," Ada Patel confirmed. "She played a long game, gathering evidence while appearing to be exactly what your sister wanted: a vulnerable elderly woman being successfully manipulated. The recording was just the final piece, ensuring her true wishes would be known and followed." The investigation extended beyond the mansion's walls. Sarah's previous failed businesses came under scrutiny, revealing a pattern of financial mismanagement and potential fraud that stretched back years. Several former investors came forward, describing how Sarah had used similar tactics of manipulation and deception to secure funding for ventures that were essentially elaborate schemes to support her lifestyle. The trust your grandmother established for Sarah's portion of the inheritance shows remarkable insight, Mr. Harrison observed during one of our meetings to discuss the estate's administration. The conditions she set, mandatory financial counseling, oversight of expenditures, requirements for productive employment or education, they're all designed to address the underlying issues your grandmother observed. As executor, I found myself spending long hours in the mansion, working with various experts to untangle the complex web of financial transactions and restore order to the estate. One evening, as I sat at our grandmother's desk reviewing documents, I discovered a letter addressed to me, tucked away in a volume of her favorite poetry. "My dearest Catherine," it began, "if you're reading this, then everything has unfolded, as I planned. I want you to understand that this was never about punishment or revenge. It was about truth and responsibility, two values your grandfather and I tried to instill in both our granddaughters. Sarah's path to redemption will be difficult, but necessary. Your role now is not just to execute my estate, but to help ensure this opportunity for change isn't wasted." The letter continued, revealing the careful thought our grandmother had put into every aspect of her plan. She had chosen me as executor not just because of my business acumen, but because she believed I possessed the strength to handle the difficult decisions ahead while maintaining compassion for Sarah despite her actions. "The Reynolds Family Foundation isn't just about scholarships," the letter explained. "It's about creating a legacy of responsibility and ethical behavior in business. The board members I've selected understand this mission. They'll help guide Sarah if she's willing to accept guidance, but they won't enable further destructive behavior. The future now rests in all of your hands." Maria found me later that evening, still sitting at the desk, contemplating the letter's implications. "Mrs. Eleanor always said that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in helping them find their own strength," she said softly. She believed Miss Sarah could change, but only if forced to confront the truth about herself. The task ahead was daunting. Beyond the criminal investigation and the estate administration, there was the more challenging work of helping Sarah face the consequences of her actions while offering her a path to redemption. Our grandmother's final gift wasn't just her material wealth. It was a carefully crafted opportunity for healing and transformation, if we were brave enough to accept it. The first court hearing arrived with the crisp autumn air. As I walked up the courthouse steps, memories of childhood visits to this same building with our grandmother flooded back. She had served as a court reporter here for 30 years, earning the respect of judges and attorneys alike. Now, her meticulous nature would serve justice one final time. Sarah's preliminary hearing drew considerable attention from local media, given our family's prominence in the community. The Reynolds name had always been associated with philanthropy and civic leadership. Our grandfather had served on the city council, and our grandmother had established several community programs. Now, reporters gathered outside, eager to document what they saw as the fall of a prominent family's younger heir. Inside the courtroom, I sat with Maria and Mr. Harrison, watching as Sarah was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, a stark contrast to her usual designer attire. The past 3 weeks in custody had stripped away her carefully maintained facade. Without her expensive makeup and styled hair, she looked vulnerable, almost like the little sister I remembered from our childhood. District Attorney Caroline Martinez presented the state's case with devastating precision. "Your Honor, the evidence demonstrates a calculated pattern of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Ms. Sarah Reynolds systematically manipulated her grandmother's medication, isolated her from family and friends, and methodically drained her accounts of hundreds of thousands of dollars." The evidence was projected onto screens throughout the courtroom, Bank statements, medication records, and photographs of the missing artifacts appeared in succession. But it was the audio clips from our grandmother's recording that seemed to affect Sarah the most. Each time Grandma Eleanor's voice filled the courtroom, I watched my sister flinch, as if each word physically pained her. Sarah's defense attorney, Marcus Webb, attempted to paint a different picture. My client moved in with her grandmother out of genuine concern and familial duty. Any financial transactions were authorized. Mrs. Eleanor Reynolds was known for her generosity, particularly toward her younger granddaughter, who chose to put her life on hold to provide care. The judge, a contemporary of our grandmother's, listened intently as D.A. Martinez countered. "We have documented evidence of Mrs. Reynolds' true intentions, along with proof of unauthorized transactions and deliberate medication manipulation. Furthermore, we've uncovered a pattern of similar behavior in Ms. Sarah Reynolds' previous business ventures." During a brief recess, I found myself in the courthouse corridor, staring out at the city skyline. A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Judge Marcus Patterson, our grandmother's old friend and the keeper of her true will, approached quietly. "Your grandmother came to me 6 months ago," he said, his voice carrying decades of judicial gravity. She was troubled by what she had discovered, but determined to handle it in a way that might save Sarah from herself. She said something I'll never forget. "Justice without wisdom is like a river without banks. It may flow strong, but it destroys everything in its path." I turned to face him, noting the compassion in his weathered features. "She gave Sarah every chance to change course, didn't she? Even while gathering evidence against her." "Eleanor was playing a longer game than any of us initially realized," he nodded. "The trust conditions she established weren't just about protecting the money. They were about creating a framework for rehabilitation. She believed Sarah's behavior stemmed from deeper issues, a need for validation, a fear of inadequacy, a pattern of seeking external solutions to internal problems." Back in the courtroom, D.A. Martinez called her final witness, Dr. Rachel Chen, a forensic psychiatrist who had evaluated Sarah. "In my professional opinion, Ms. Reynolds exhibits patterns consistent with narcissistic personality disorder complicated by an underlying anxiety disorder. Her fraudulent behavior appears to be both a means of financial gain and a way to maintain control over her environment and relationships." Sarah's composure finally broke. "You don't understand," she shouted, rising from her seat. "I was trying to protect Grandma's legacy. Catherine abandoned her for her career. I was the only one who cared enough to stay." The judge's gavel cracked sharply. "Ms. Reynolds, control yourself or you'll be removed from the courtroom." Sarah sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, I saw past her manipulations to the deep well of pain beneath. Our grandmother had seen it too, I realized. Her elaborate plan wasn't just about justice, it was a carefully orchestrated intervention. After the hearing, Maria shared another revelation. The night before Mrs. Eleanor began recording everything, she told me something important. She said, "Maria, sometimes love means letting someone face the consequences of their actions, but it also means making sure those consequences lead to healing, not just punishment." The judge's decision reflected this philosophy. Sarah would face criminal charges, but with a recommendation for intensive therapy and rehabilitation programs. The trust our grandmother had established would provide support for mental health, treatment, and education, but only if Sarah committed to the process of change. As the bailiff led Sarah away, our eyes met briefly. In that moment, I saw a glimmer of something new in her expression. Not defiance or manipulation, but perhaps the first flicker of genuine self-reflection. Our grandmother's final lesson was still unfolding. True justice could be both firm and compassionate, holding someone accountable while offering them a path to redemption. In the weeks following the court hearing, The true magnitude of Sarah's actions continued to emerge. The forensic accountants had completed their comprehensive analysis, revealing a pattern of financial manipulation that extended far beyond our initial discoveries. Through a series of meticulously documented spreadsheets, they traced how Sarah had systematically diverted funds from our grandmother's accounts into a complex web of shell companies and hidden investments. The morning I received their final report, I sat in what had once been our grandfather's study, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. His law books still lined the shelves, their leather spines worn from years of use. The Persian rug beneath my feet had been a gift from a grateful client 40 years ago. Everything in this room told a story of integrity and hard work, principles that Sarah had thoroughly rejected. "Miss Catherine," Maria's voice drew me from my thoughts. She entered carrying a small wooden box I'd never seen before. "I found this while cleaning Mrs. Eleanor's private safe. There was a note saying it should be opened only after the forensic review was complete." She placed the box on the desk, her hands trembling slightly. The box was crafted from rich mahogany, with our family crest inlaid in silver on its lid. Inside, I found a leather-bound journal and a USB drive labeled Final Testimony. My heart raced as I connected the drive to my laptop. Our grandmother's face appeared on the screen, recorded in what appeared to be her final days. "My dearest grandchildren," she began, her voice weaker than in the previous recording, but her eyes sharp and clear. "If you're watching this, then—" The full extent of our family's situation has been revealed. "Catherine, what you've discovered in the forensic report isn't just about money, it's about patterns that began long before Sarah moved in with me." She shifted in her chair, drawing a deep breath. "I've spent months documenting everything, not just for legal purposes, but to understand where we went wrong as a family. The journal contains my observations and reflections, going back to your childhood. I see now how differently we treated you both, how we enabled Sarah's worst tendencies while pushing you, Catherine, to be endlessly responsible." The revelation struck me with unexpected force. I opened the journal, finding page after page of our grandmother's elegant handwriting. She had documented instances throughout our childhood where Sarah's manipulative behavior had been rewarded, while my attempts to establish boundaries were criticized. The pattern was clear, stretching back decades. "The trust I've established," our grandmother continued in the video, "isn't just about protecting the estate's assets. It's an attempt to correct my own failures as a grandmother. Sarah needs structure, accountability, and professional help, things I should have insisted on years ago. And you, Catherine, need to know that your approach to life wasn't wrong. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships." Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, the family therapist appointed by the court to evaluate our situation, arrived later that afternoon. As we reviewed the journal together, she offered insights that helped contextualize our grandmother's observations. "Your grandmother's final act was remarkably prescient," Dr. Morgan noted, examining a particularly detailed entry. "She recognized that the family dynamics she helped create contributed to Sarah's behavior. But instead of simply enabling or punishing, she created a framework for genuine change." The journal revealed how our grandmother had consulted with psychiatric professionals and financial experts while crafting the trust's conditions. Each requirement, from therapy sessions to financial literacy courses, was carefully designed to address specific patterns she had observed. "What's particularly interesting," Dr. Morgan continued, "is how your grandmother used her own documentation process as a form of therapy. These entries show her working through her role in the family dynamics, accepting responsibility for her part while planning constructive solutions." A letter tucked into the journal's final pages caught my attention. It was addressed to the Board of Trustees, outlining specific guidelines for Sarah's rehabilitation program. Our grandmother had arranged for a comprehensive support system, mental health professionals, financial advisors, career counselors, and mentors who could guide Sarah toward genuine independence. The goal, she wrote, is not to punish Sarah indefinitely, but to help her develop the skills and insights needed for genuine success. The trust should function as scaffolding, providing support while she builds her own foundation, not as a permanent restraint. The document detailed a series of milestones Sarah could work toward, each accompanied by increased independence in managing her portion of the inheritance. It was a path to redemption that required genuine effort and growth, not just surface-level compliance. As I reviewed these materials with Mr. Harrison and the trustees, I realized the full scope of our grandmother's vision. She had transformed what could have been a simple inheritance dispute into an opportunity for profound family healing. The forensic report wasn't just a record of Sarah's crimes, it was a diagnostic tool, identifying patterns that needed to be addressed for any real change to occur. Your grandmother, Mr. Harrison observed, turned her own pain and disappointment into a blueprint for transformation. She could have simply disinherited Sarah or left the estate to you entirely. Instead, she created a pathway for genuine rehabilitation while ensuring the estate's resources wouldn't enable further destructive behavior. The weight of responsibility settled over me as I contemplated my role in this carefully crafted plan. As executor, I wasn't just managing assets. I was helping implement a vision of accountability and growth that could reshape our family's future. The rehabilitation center sat on 30 acres of wooded land outside the city, its modern buildings blending harmoniously with the natural landscape. As I pulled into the visitors' parking lot for my first approved visit with Sarah, I noticed how different this place was from the county jail where she'd spent the past month. The judge had agreed to transfer her here as part of a plea agreement, one that prioritized rehabilitation over punishment. Dr. Sophia Chen, the center's director, met me in her office overlooking a meditation garden. Your sister's case is unique, she explained, reviewing Sarah's file. Most of our patients are here for substance abuse or mental health crises. Sarah's situation, the combination of financial fraud, elder abuse, and underlying personality disorders, requires a specially tailored program. The center had worked with our grandmother's trustees to develop a comprehensive treatment plan. Sarah would spend at least 6 months here, engaging in individual therapy, group counseling, and specialized programs designed to address her specific issues. The trust would cover all expenses, but with strict conditions attached to Sarah's progress. The first few weeks have been challenging, Dr. Chen admitted. Sarah initially tried to manipulate other patients, attempting to form alliances and create drama. But our staff is trained to recognize and address these behaviors. We've seen some promising signs of breakthrough, especially in her art therapy sessions. She showed me several of Sarah's paintings, dark, chaotic works that gradually evolved into more structured pieces. The latest one caught my attention, a portrait of our grandmother, painted from memory, her expression both stern and loving. This represents significant progress, Dr. Chen noted. She's beginning to see Eleanor as a complete person, not just someone to manipulate or rebel against. When Sarah entered the consultation room, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Instead, she wore the center's standard uniform, khaki pants and a blue polo shirt. Her face was bare of makeup, and her hair was pulled back simply. But the biggest change was in her eyes. The constant calculation I'd grown used to seeing there was replaced by something raw and uncertain. "They make us do these stupid exercises," she said by way of greeting, but her usual bitterness seemed muted. "Writing letters to people we've hurt, examining our patterns of behavior, talking about our feelings all day long." She fidgeted with the sleeve of her shirt. "Did you know Grandma had been planning this for months? Years, maybe?" I nodded, thinking of the detailed journal. "She saw what was happening and wanted to help you, Sarah. Really help you, not just enable you like we'd all been doing." Sarah's face crumpled slightly. They showed me the medication records yesterday, how I'd been adjusting her prescriptions. I didn't. I never thought about it as hurting her. I just needed her to be more compliant, less sharp. But seeing it all laid out like that? She trailed off, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. Dr. Ramirez, Sarah's primary therapist, joined us. Sarah's beginning to understand the concept of impact versus intent, she explained. It's a crucial step in developing empathy and taking genuine responsibility for one's actions. Sarah shot her an irritated look, but it lacked the venom I was used to seeing. They keep talking about underlying issues and core wounds, like somehow this is all because Mom and Dad split up when we were kids, or because Grandma and Grandpa paid more attention to you. Those experiences shaped you, Dr. Ramirez said gently, but they didn't determine your choices. Part of your work here is understanding the difference. The center's program was comprehensive. Beyond therapy, Sarah was required to take courses in financial management, ethics, and emotional intelligence. She participated in community service within the center, learning to contribute without expecting immediate personal gain. The trust's conditions were clear. Her progress here would determine her future access to her inheritance. We found something interesting in her psychological evaluation, Dr. Chen shared after Sarah had returned to her unit. Despite her manipulative behaviors, Sarah shows high emotional intelligence and strong leadership capabilities. These traits, properly channeled, could be tremendous assets. The challenge is helping her redirect these abilities toward constructive rather than exploitative ends. The center's approach aligned perfectly with our grandmother's vision. Each aspect of the program was designed to address the root causes of Sarah's behavior while developing healthier alternatives. The trust wouldn't just restrict her access to money, it would teach her to build genuine success. Your grandmother's plan was remarkably forward-thinking, Dr. Ramirez observed. Most families in similar situations either enable the destructive behavior or cut ties completely. She found a middle path that offers both accountability and hope. As I prepared to leave, Sarah stopped me. I found this in my journal, she said, handing me a folded piece of paper. It was a letter she'd written as part of her therapy addressed to our grandmother. The words were messy, tear-stained, but sincere. Dear Grandma, I'm starting to understand what you did. Not just the recording and the evidence, but all of it. You saw who I really was. Not just the manipulative parts, but the scared little girl underneath who never learned how to be genuine. You could have just cut me off. Instead, you gave me one last gift, the chance to become someone better. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm trying. For the first time in my life, I'm really trying. The letter wasn't finished. Like Sarah's journey, it was still a work in progress. But as I drove home that evening, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Our grandmother's final plan wasn't just about justice or punishment. It was about transformation, about believing that even the deepest wounds could heal with the right support and structure. The first real test of our grandmother's carefully constructed plan came 3 months into Sarah's rehabilitation program. I was reviewing estate documents in the mansion's library when Maria rushed in, clutching her phone with trembling hands. Miss Catherine, you need to see this. Your parents, they're trying to challenge the trust. The email from our family's longtime attorney, Mr. Peterson, confirmed my worst fears. Our parents had filed a legal petition claiming that grandmother Eleanor had been unduly influenced in her final months, not by Sarah, but by me. They alleged that I had manipulated our grandmother into creating the trust as a way to control Sarah and the family fortune. They're saying you orchestrated everything, Maria said, her voice tight with anger. That you planted the recording devices, convinced me to lie about Sarah's actions, even falsified the medication records. They're demanding a full investigation and immediate suspension of the trust's conditions. The irony was almost laughable. They were using the same manipulation tactics Sarah had employed, just with a different target. But our grandmother, brilliant strategist that she was, had anticipated even this possibility. I reached for a specific volume on grandfather's law shelf, a book on trust law that looked thoroughly ordinary from the outside. Inside was a hidden compartment containing a sealed envelope marked, "In case of family challenge." The letter inside was dated just 2 weeks before our grandmother's passing. "My dear Catherine," it began, "if you're reading this, then your parents have chosen to continue their pattern of enabling Sarah's behavior rather than supporting her growth. I've prepared for this contingency. Contact Judge Patterson immediately. He has video documentation of every meeting where I discussed and refined the trust's conditions. These meetings included independent psychiatric evaluations confirming my mental competency and detailed explanations of my reasoning." The next morning, I met with Judge Patterson in his chambers. He withdrew a large file from his safe, along with several encrypted hard drives. "Your grandmother was extraordinarily thorough," he explained, laying out the evidence. "She had every meeting professionally recorded and transcribed. Multiple experts evaluated her mental state throughout the process. She even underwent a comprehensive neurological examination to establish her cognitive clarity. The recordings were revelatory. In one, our grandmother spoke directly about our parents' potential interference. I understand that Thomas and Linda will likely challenge this. They've spent years trying to compensate for their divorce by giving Sarah everything she wanted. But true parental love means setting boundaries, not enabling destructive behavior." Another video showed her meeting with Dr. Alexandra Martinez, a renowned psychiatrist specializing in family dynamics. "The pattern in this family is clear," Dr. Martinez observed. "Sarah learned early that manipulation gets results. Catherine learned that setting boundaries gets punishment. The trust isn't just about protecting assets. It's about breaking this generational cycle." As we reviewed the materials, an unexpected visitor arrived. Aunt Margaret, our father's sister, whom we hadn't seen in years. She carried a worn leather briefcase filled with letters and photographs. "Your grandmother came to me 6 months ago," she explained. "She knew I'd witnessed the family dynamics from the beginning, and she asked me to document everything I'd observed over the years." Aunt Margaret's evidence painted a devastating picture of our parents' role in enabling Sarah's behavior. Photos showed expensive gifts given to Sarah after particularly manipulative episodes. Letters detailed incidents where our parents had pressured relatives into giving Sarah money or opportunities she hadn't earned. There were even records of them paying off angry investors from her failed businesses, allowing her to escape the natural consequences of her actions. "Your grandmother realized that any real change would require dismantling the entire support system that enabled Sarah's behavior," Aunt Margaret explained. "That's why the trust isn't just about Sarah. It's about restructuring how the whole family deals with conflict and responsibility." The trust's legal team moved swiftly to counter our parents' challenge. In a preliminary hearing, they presented the video evidence along with expert testimony from Dr. Martinez and other professionals who had worked with our grandmother. Judge Emily Chen, presiding over the case, was particularly interested in the documented pattern of enabling behavior. "This court finds the challenge not only without merit, but potentially harmful to Sarah Reynolds's rehabilitation," Judge Chen declared. "The trust's conditions show remarkable insight into addressing long-standing family dynamics. Any attempt to disrupt this carefully constructed rehabilitation plan would be contrary to both the settlers' wishes and the beneficiaries' best interests." Our parents' reaction to the ruling revealed just how deeply the enabling patterns ran. Instead of accepting the judge's decision, they began calling family members, trying to rally support for their position. But our grandmother had anticipated this too. The trust included provisions for family counseling and education about enabling behaviors. Dr. Martinez, now serving as a family systems consultant for the trust, explained it best. Your grandmother understood that sustainable change requires addressing the entire family ecosystem. The trust isn't just about rehabilitating Sarah. It's about healing generational patterns of enablement and manipulation. The trust offered to cover counseling expenses for any family member willing to participate in the healing process. To everyone's surprise, Aunt Margaret volunteered to be the first participant, sharing her observations of how the family's enabling patterns had affected multiple generations. Your grandmother's legacy isn't just financial, Aunt Margaret told me as we left the courthouse. She created a framework for genuine family transformation. The question now is whether everyone will be brave enough to participate in the change she envisioned. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Sarah's rehabilitation center. Despite hearing about our parents' legal challenge, she had chosen not to support their petition. The old Sarah would have jumped at the chance to escape accountability, Dr. Chen noted. This represents significant progress in her treatment. In her latest therapy session, Sarah had written another letter, this time to our parents. Please stop trying to rescue me. For the first time in my life, I'm learning to face the consequences of my actions. It's hard and it hurts, but it's also the only way I'll ever become the person Grandma believed I could be. As the dust settled from our parents' failed legal challenge, an unexpected discovery emerged from the mansion's renovation. The construction crew, while updating the old library's electrical system, found a hidden compartment behind one of the bookcases. Inside was a collection of old journals dating back to our great-grandmother Rose Reynolds. I sat in the library that evening, carefully examining these time-worn volumes with Maria and Aunt Margaret. The journals revealed a pattern we hadn't known existed. Our family had faced a similar crisis 2 generations ago. Listen to this entry from 1962, Aunt Margaret read, her voice trembling with emotion. My son Thomas, your father, shows the same concerning behaviors as his Uncle George did. The constant manipulation, the emotional blackmail, the inability to accept responsibility. I see history repeating itself, but I lack the courage my mother had to address it directly. The journals detailed how our great-grandmother Rose had confronted her own brother's destructive behavior, establishing strict conditions for his inheritance that required him to undergo rehabilitation for gambling addiction. The family had largely buried this history, but our grandmother Eleanor had clearly found and studied these journals while crafting her plan for Sarah. There's more, Maria said, carefully turning the brittle pages of another journal. Mrs. Rose writes about how the family divided over her decision. Some supported the tough love approach, while others accused her of being cruel. But look at this photograph. She pulled out a faded image showing a distinguished-looking man in a graduation gown. This is George Reynolds, 20 years after the intervention, receiving his PhD in psychology. He eventually became a counselor for others struggling with addiction. The discovery of these journals brought new allies to our cause. Distant cousins who had known Great-Uncle George reached out, sharing stories of how Rose's intervention had transformed not just his life, but the entire family's approach to accountability and support. One afternoon, I received a call from cousin Rebecca, George's daughter, now a prominent psychologist herself. I've been following Sarah's case through family channels, she said. What your grandmother did, it's almost exactly what my grandmother Rose did for my father. The same combination of firm boundaries and loving support. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Rebecca's expertise proved invaluable. She began consulting with Sarah's treatment team, sharing insights from her father's journey and her own professional experience. Recovery isn't just about the individual, she explained during a family counseling session. It's about healing generational patterns. Your grandmother Eleanor understood this, just as my grandmother Rose did. Sarah's response to learning about Great-Uncle George's story marked a significant turning point in her therapy. During a supervised family session, she read his journals for the first time. He writes about feeling entitled to family money, about manipulating people, about the rage when someone finally said no to him, she said, her voice quiet. It's like reading about myself. Dr. Chen noted how this historical perspective helped Sarah contextualize her own behavior. Seeing similar patterns in family history helps patients understand their actions as learned behaviors that can be unlearned, rather than fixed character traits. The renovation crew made another discovery that week, a series of letters between Eleanor and Rose, written in the last years of Rose's life. These letters showed how our grandmother had sought guidance from her mother-in-law's experience, while planning Sarah's intervention. "My dearest Eleanor," one letter read, "your concerns about Sarah remind me so much of my struggles with George. Remember that true love sometimes requires standing firm in the face of manipulation and anger. The path to healing is rarely comfortable, but it is always worth the effort." This historical context brought new depth to our grandmother's plan. She hadn't just created a trust with conditions, she had studied a successful family precedent, learning from Rose's experience while adapting it to modern circumstances. The revelation of this family history also affected our parents in unexpected ways. Our father, confronted with his own mother's writings about his childhood behavior patterns, began to show signs of reflection. He requested access to the family counseling services provided by the trust. "I see now that I've been recreating my own childhood dynamics with Sarah," he admitted during a session. "Always trying to protect her from consequences, just as my parents did with me until my grandmother Rose intervened." Even some of Sarah's former enablers began to shift their perspective. Cousin Patricia, who had initially supported our parents' challenge to the trust, reached out after reading Great-Uncle George's journals. "I had no idea we had this history of addiction and enabling in our family," she said. "Seeing how Rose's intervention ultimately helped George, it changes how I view what Eleanor did for Sarah." The Trust's Board of Trustees incorporated these historical insights into their rehabilitation program. They created a family history component, using stories and lessons from Rose and George's experience to help current family members understand patterns of behavior and paths to recovery. Sarah's therapist reported that learning about Great-Uncle George provided her with something she desperately needed: hope. Seeing concrete evidence that someone else in the family overcame similar struggles makes the possibility of change feel more real to her, Dr. Ramirez noted. One evening, as I was organizing the historical documents with Aunt Margaret, we found a letter Eleanor had written but never sent to Sarah. It was dated just days before her death. "My darling granddaughter, you are not the first in our family to walk this difficult path, nor will you be the last. But like those who came before you, you have the strength to choose a different way. Rose showed us that family love sometimes means being brave enough to say no. I hope one day you'll understand that everything I've done comes from that same love." 6 months into Sarah's rehabilitation program, an unexpected crisis threatened to unravel everything our grandmother had carefully planned. A group of Sarah's former business associates emerged, threatening to file criminal charges over her previous fraudulent ventures unless they received substantial compensation. Their timing wasn't coincidental. They'd learned about the trust through the recent legal proceedings and saw an opportunity for extortion. I received the news during a meeting with Mr. Harrison and the trust's legal team. "They're demanding $500,000 in exchange for not pressing charges," he explained, sliding a folder across the desk. "They have documented evidence of Sarah's fraudulent activities from her event planning company 3 years ago." The trust's legal advisors were divided on how to handle the situation. Some argued for immediate payment to protect Sarah's recovery progress, while others insisted we should fight the extortion attempt. But our grandmother, ever prescient, had left guidance for exactly this scenario. In a sealed envelope marked, "When past actions surface," we found her instructions. The trust must not be used to bury Sarah's past misdeeds. Real healing requires facing consequences, not avoiding them. However, the trust can provide legal representation to ensure fair treatment and continue supporting rehabilitation efforts. Dr. Chen called an emergency session at the rehabilitation center to discuss the situation with Sarah. To everyone's surprise, Sarah's response showed remarkable growth. "I did it," she admitted, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. "I defrauded them. I used their investments to cover personal expenses and earlier debts. I can't keep running from what I did." Her therapist, Dr. Ramirez, later described this moment as a breakthrough. For the first time, Sarah chose accountability over manipulation. Instead of looking for ways to escape consequences, she's choosing to face them. The Trust's legal team, following our grandmother's guidance, developed a two-pronged approach. They would provide Sarah with legal representation to ensure fair treatment, but any financial settlements would need to come from her future earnings, not the Trust itself. Additionally, they would work with prosecutors to integrate any legal consequences into her existing rehabilitation program. During this crisis, an unexpected ally emerged. James Chen, one of Sarah's former business partners and victims, came forward after learning about her rehabilitation efforts. Instead of joining the extortion attempt, he offered to help create a restitution program that could benefit everyone involved. "I was angry for a long time," James explained during a mediation session, "but seeing the effort being made toward genuine rehabilitation, that's worth more than money. I'd rather be part of the solution than just another person seeking revenge." Working with James and other willing parties, the Trust's team developed an innovative resolution. Sarah would create a detailed confession of her fraudulent activities, which would serve both as evidence of her crimes and as a case study for preventing similar fraud. She would also commit to a structured repayment plan once she completed her rehabilitation and secured employment. The process of documenting her past actions proved therapeutically valuable. "Each confession forces me to fully acknowledge what I did," Sarah wrote in her therapy journal. "Not just the actions themselves, but the thinking behind them. I can't hide behind excuses anymore." This crisis also revealed the effectiveness of our grandmother's rehabilitation framework. When faced with exposure of her past crimes, Sarah didn't revert to her old patterns of manipulation and denial. Instead, she demonstrated the beginning of genuine character transformation. Maria, who had been organizing more of Eleanor's papers, found a relevant passage in her personal diary. "True rehabilitation isn't tested when things are easy. It's the moments of crisis that show whether real change has taken root." Sarah will face many such tests. The Trust's role is not to shield her from these challenges, but to provide a supportive framework for handling them appropriately. The Trust's board used this situation to create new protocols for handling similar challenges. They established clear guidelines for distinguishing between enabling behavior and appropriate support, ensuring that future crises would be handled consistently with Eleanor's vision of accountability and growth. Dr. Alexandra Martinez, conducting her monthly evaluation of Sarah's progress, noted significant positive changes in her response to this crisis. 6 months ago, Sarah would have immediately looked for ways to manipulate or escape the situation. Now she's demonstrating the ability to face consequences while accepting appropriate help, a crucial distinction in recovery. The resolution of this crisis had unexpected ripple effects throughout the family. Seeing Sarah take responsibility for her past actions inspired others to examine their own behaviors. Our father, in particular, began to acknowledge his role in enabling her previous schemes. "I knew about some of those fraudulent businesses," he admitted during a family therapy session. "I told myself I was protecting her by covering up the problems. Now I see I was just making it easier for her to continue destructive patterns." Our mother, too, showed signs of growing awareness. After attending a Trust-sponsored workshop on enabling behaviors, she wrote a letter to Sarah. "I thought loving you meant saving you from every difficulty. I see now that I was wrong. Real love means supporting you as you learn to handle challenges on your own. As this crisis subsided, Sarah faced her quarterly review with the Trust's board. Her handling of the situation had demonstrated significant progress toward the Trust's rehabilitation goals. While she still had considerable work ahead, particularly in making restitution to her victims, she had shown genuine growth in facing consequences constructively. "Your grandmother would be proud," Aunt Margaret told me as we reviewed the quarterly reports. "Not because everything's perfect, but because real change is happening." She understood that true transformation often requires facing the very circumstances we most fear. The one-year anniversary of our grandmother's passing arrived with an unexpected discovery. During the final phase of the mansion's renovation, workers uncovered a time capsule Eleanor had hidden in the foundation decades ago. The date inscribed on its seal read, "To be opened when healing begins." Inside, we found photographs, letters, and a journal documenting the early years of our family's wealth. Most surprising was a detailed account of our grandfather's own struggles with his sudden inheritance and how Eleanor had helped him develop a healthier relationship with money and success. "James wasn't born into wealth," she wrote. "When his family's shipping business unexpectedly fell to him, he nearly self-destructed trying to prove himself worthy of it. Our marriage survived because we learned to view wealth as a responsibility rather than a privilege. I hope my grandchildren can learn this lesson with less pain." The timing of this discovery coincided with Sarah's transition to the next phase of her rehabilitation program. After successfully completing her intensive therapy, she was ready to begin the Trust's integration phase, a carefully structured program that would gradually reintroduce her to managing responsibilities and resources. Dr. Chen presented Sarah's progress report to the Trust's board. "We've seen consistent evidence of fundamental change," she explained, displaying charts tracking Sarah's behavioral metrics. "The most significant indicator is her response to stress. Instead of reverting to manipulation when challenged, she's developing healthy coping mechanisms." The integration phase would test these changes. Under the Trust's guidelines, Sarah would move into a supervised apartment and begin part-time work with a nonprofit organization focused on preventing financial fraud. Her role would involve sharing her story with others while learning legitimate business practices. "It's terrifying," Sarah admitted during her exit interview from the residential program. "For the first time in my life, I can't rely on manipulation or family connections. I have to build something real." She paused, touching the simple silver necklace that had been our grandmother's, her only piece of jewelry allowed during rehabilitation. "But I think that's what Grandma wanted for me all along." The nonprofit position revealed unexpected depths to Sarah's transformation. Jessica Martinez, her supervisor, reported that Sarah's insights into manipulative behavior made her particularly effective at helping others recognize and resist financial exploitation. "She has a unique ability to spot manipulation tactics because she used to employ them herself," Jessica noted. "But now she's using that knowledge to protect potential victims. It's a remarkable example of turning past mistakes into valuable wisdom." During this period, our parents also showed significant growth. The family counseling sessions had helped them recognize their own enabling patterns. Our father joined a support group for parents of adult children in recovery, while our mother began volunteering with elderly fraud prevention programs. "I keep thinking about what your grandmother wrote in those journals we found," our father said during a family dinner, our first in over a year, about how wealth becomes toxic when it's used to avoid consequences rather than create value. "I did exactly what she warned against with Sarah." The Trust's educational initiatives expanded based on the lessons learned from our family's experience. Working with financial advisors and mental health professionals, they developed programs to help other wealthy families recognize and address similar patterns of enabling and manipulation. Sarah's progress faced its first serious test when she encountered one of her former victims at a community event. Instead of avoiding the confrontation or attempting to manipulate the situation, she requested a mediation session through the Trust's restitution program. "I can't undo what I did," she told her former business partner during their mediated meeting. "But I can show you how I'm working to change and make amends." She presented a detailed plan for repayment and offered to help identify how her fraudulent tactics had succeeded so others could be protected. The encounter led to an unexpected opportunity. The victim, impressed by Sarah's genuine transformation, suggested she speak at a conference on financial fraud prevention. With the Trust's approval, Sarah developed a presentation that combined her personal story with practical advice for identifying and preventing manipulation. "The hardest part," she confided to me after the conference, "was standing in front of hundreds of people and owning my mistakes without excuses. But Grandma was right. There's power in facing the truth about yourself." Our grandmother's influence continued to surface in surprising ways. The time capsule had included letters addressed to various family members, each containing personal insights and hopes for our future. Mine spoke of the burden of being the responsible one and gave permission to find a balance between duty and personal fulfillment. "Catherine," she wrote, "you learned too young to carry others' burdens. My hope is that as Sarah heals, you too will find freedom, not from responsibility, but from the need to constantly prove your worth through perfection." As Sarah's integration phase progressed, the Trust began preparations for the next stage of our grandmother's plan. The Reynolds Family Foundation would soon begin accepting applications for its entrepreneurship scholarship program, transforming our family's wealth into an instrument for positive change in the community. "Your grandmother understood that true inheritance isn't just about money," Mr. Harrison observed during a foundation planning meeting. "It's about passing on values and wisdom." She turned what could have been a simple division of assets into a legacy of transformation. The launch of the Reynolds Family Foundation brought an unexpected test of everything we'd learned. As we prepared to announce our first round of entrepreneurship scholarships, an investigative journalist contacted us about running a story on our family's scandalous inheritance dispute. She had uncovered details about Sarah's fraud, our parents' enabling, and the Trust's intervention program. My first instinct was to protect the family's privacy, but a final video from our grandmother, marked "When Public Exposure Threatens," provided different guidance. Secrecy breeds shame, and shame breeds dysfunction. Let the truth serve as both warning and inspiration. Our story, properly told, might help other families face their own difficult truths. After consulting with the Trust's advisors, we decided to take control of the narrative. Rather than hiding from the publicity, we would use it to further our grandmother's vision of turning family pain into community benefit. The foundation would partner with the journalist to tell the complete story, including both the difficult parts and the journey toward healing. Sarah's response to this decision demonstrated how far she'd come. "I used to be terrified of people. Knowing the real me," she said during a family council meeting. "Now I realize that hiding the truth was part of what kept me sick. If sharing our story helps even one family avoid our mistakes, isn't that worth more than protecting our image?" The journalist, Rebecca Chen, spent weeks interviewing family members, reviewing documentation, and observing the foundation's programs. She was particularly interested in how our grandmother had transformed a potential family tragedy into a force for positive change. "Most wealthy families try to bury their problems with money," Rebecca noted during our interview. "Your grandmother did something revolutionary. She used money as a tool for forcing honesty and growth. That's a story worth telling." During this period, Sarah faced her own milestone in the recovery process. The Trust's conditions required her to begin making restitution to her past victims, using a portion of her salary from the nonprofit work. Instead of viewing this as punishment, she developed a personal mission to transform each repayment into an opportunity for healing. With each monthly payment, Sarah included a letter documenting her progress and insights. "I'm not just repaying money," she explained to her therapy group. "I'm demonstrating month by month that change is possible. Each payment is a promise kept, a small restoration of trust." One of her former victims, initially skeptical of her transformation, wrote back, "Your grandmother's approach to justice is unlike anything I've seen. Instead of just punishing wrongdoing, she created a path for genuine redemption. Your monthly letters and payments show me that's actually possible." The Foundation's first major initiative reflected this philosophy of transformative justice. Beyond just offering scholarships, we created a mentorship program pairing successful entrepreneurs with those who had lost businesses to fraud or manipulation. Sarah's experience helped shape the program's approach to addressing both practical and emotional recovery. "Financial fraud doesn't just steal money," Sarah observed during a program planning session. "It steals trust, confidence, and hope. Real restitution has to address all of those elements." Our parents, continuing their own growth, proposed adding a family dynamics component to the Foundation's programs. They worked with therapists to develop workshops helping other parents recognize and address enabling behaviors before they became entrenched patterns. "We spent years thinking we were protecting Sarah," our mother shared during the first workshop. "Actually, we were protecting ourselves from the pain of seeing her fail. That's not love. It's fear, disguised as love." The journalist's story, when published, sparked unexpected nationwide interest. Other wealthy families began reaching out, seeking guidance on addressing similar situations. The Trust's legal team received requests to share their framework for rehabilitation-focused inheritance structures. Mr. Harrison assembled a task force to determine how best to share these resources while maintaining the integrity of our grandmother's vision. Eleanor's approach combined accountability with compassion in a unique way, he noted. "We need to ensure that framework isn't diluted as it spreads." Sarah's role in this expansion proved surprisingly valuable. Her personal experience helped other families understand the difference between enabling and genuine support. During a Foundation seminar, she articulated this distinction clearly. "Enabling protects you from consequences. Support helps you handle consequences constructively. I had to lose everything to learn the difference." The Trust's board recognized this growth by approving Sarah's transition to the next phase of rehabilitation. She would begin working directly with the Foundation, using her experience to help design intervention programs for other families struggling with similar issues. "Your grandmother would be proud," Maria told me as we watched Sarah give her first presentation to a group of family wealth advisors. "Not because everything's perfect, but because the healing has extended beyond our family. She always said that true wealth multiplies when shared wisely." A letter found in our grandmother's study, dated just weeks before her death, seemed to anticipate this outcome. "Money can be a prison or a bridge. Used to avoid truth, it traps us in cycles of dysfunction. Used to face truth, it can build paths to transformation. My hope is that our family's journey will help others find their way to freedom." 18 months after our grandmother's passing, a crisis emerged that tested everything we'd built. A prominent tech billionaire, inspired by our story, attempted to replicate our grandmother's trust structure with his own family. However, his version stripped away the rehabilitation focus, using financial control purely as punishment. He publicly credited our grandmother's model, threatening to undermine everything she'd worked to achieve. "This is exactly what Eleanor feared," Mr. Harrison said during an emergency board meeting. "She worried her methods might be misused as tools for control rather than transformation." He produced yet another sealed envelope from our grandmother's files, this one marked, "When others misuse the model." Inside was a clear directive. If our approach is ever distorted into a weapon rather than a tool for healing, the Foundation must take a public stand. True rehabilitation requires both accountability and compassion. Neither works without the other. The situation forced us to articulate our grandmother's philosophy more explicitly than ever before. Sarah, now serving on the Foundation's advisory board, took the lead in drafting our response. Her personal experience made her uniquely qualified to explain the crucial differences between punitive control and rehabilitative structure. A trust without compassion is just another form of manipulation, she explained in a widely published open letter. What made my grandmother's approach transformative was how it combined consequences with support. She created boundaries that protected everyone while offering genuine paths to growth. The controversy attracted attention from family therapy professionals and estate planning experts. Dr. Rachel Foster, a renowned expert in family wealth dynamics, requested permission to study our grandmother's model. What Eleanor Reynolds created wasn't just an estate plan, she observed. It's a comprehensive framework for family healing that could revolutionize how we handle inherited wealth. Working with Dr. Foster, we discovered new depths to our grandmother's planning. Hidden throughout her documentation were subtle safeguards against potential misuse. Every control mechanism was balanced with support resources. Every restriction had a corresponding path to earned freedom. Your grandmother understood something profound, Dr. Foster noted while reviewing the trust documents. True change can't be forced through control alone. It requires creating conditions where people choose to change because they recognize their own patterns and desire something better. Sarah's ongoing transformation provided living proof of this principle. During a Foundation symposium addressing the controversy, she shared insights from her journey. The trust's restrictions initially felt like punishment, but they actually created space for me to see myself clearly for the first time. The difference was that every limitation came with support for developing better alternatives. The tech billionaire's daughter, Amanda, reached out to Sarah privately after reading her letter. She described feeling trapped by her father's punitive trust, seeing no path to genuine growth. This led to a pivotal meeting between our foundation and their family. Your father's trust tells you what you can't do, Sarah explained to Amanda during their consultation. Our grandmother's model showed us what we could become. That's the crucial difference between control and rehabilitation. The meeting sparked a deeper examination of how wealth and family dynamics intersect. The Foundation partnered with leading family therapy institutes to develop guidelines for creating rehabilitation-focused inheritance structures. These guidelines emphasized our grandmother's core principle. Accountability must serve growth, not punishment. During this period, we uncovered another layer of our grandmother's foresight. In her final months, she had documented specific warnings about how her methods might be misinterpreted or misused. Each warning came with detailed guidance for maintaining the delicate balance between consequences and support. Power over others, even with good intentions, tends to corrupt, she wrote. The trust's authority must always serve transformation, never control. When in doubt, ask, does this restriction create space for growth, or does it simply enforce compliance? The Foundation established an ethics committee specifically focused on preserving these principles. Sarah's role on this committee proved invaluable, as she could spot subtle forms of control masquerading as rehabilitation. Her own experience helped her distinguish between truly transformative practices and mere behavior modification. I lived both sides of this, she explained during a committee meeting. I know how it feels to be controlled, and I know how it feels to be supported through genuine change. The difference isn't in the restrictions themselves, but in their purpose and implementation. Our parents, continuing their own growth, helped develop guidelines for other parents struggling with similar challenges. They emphasized the importance of examining one's own motivations when setting boundaries for adult children. We thought strict control would force Sarah to change, our father shared during a parent workshop. Eleanor showed us that real change comes from creating safe spaces where people can face their own truth without being destroyed by it. The controversy ultimately strengthened our grandmother's legacy by forcing us to articulate her principles more clearly. The foundation developed a certification program for family trusts, seeking to implement rehabilitation-focused structures, ensuring our grandmother's methods wouldn't be distorted into tools of punishment. Eleanor Reynolds understood that money magnifies whatever we bring to it, Dr. Foster concluded in her research paper. If we bring a desire for control, money becomes a weapon. If we bring a commitment to growth, it becomes a tool for transformation. Her genius lay in creating structures that consistently serve growth over control. 2 years after our grandmother's passing, an unexpected letter arrived from Switzerland. A distant cousin, Victoria Reynolds, had been tracking our foundation's work and revealed something startling. Our grandmother Eleanor hadn't created her trust model alone. She'd refined it through correspondence with Victoria's mother, Isabel, who had faced similar challenges with her own family decades ago. Victoria arrived at the mansion carrying a weathered leather briefcase filled with 20 years of letters between Eleanor and Isabel. Their correspondence revealed a deep collaboration that had shaped our grandmother's approach to rehabilitation-focused inheritance. Mother and Aunt Eleanor were pioneers, Victoria explained, carefully laying out the letters. They saw how wealth could either heal or destroy families, depending on how it was structured. But Isabel's early attempts at rehabilitation trusts failed because they lacked the psychological framework Eleanor later developed. The letters documented both successes and failures, showing how our grandmother had learned from Isabel's experiences to create something more comprehensive. One particularly poignant letter from Isabel warned, "Control without healing creates rebellion. Healing without accountability enables destruction. We must find the balance between them." This discovery came at a crucial moment. Sarah, now completing her final phase of rehabilitation, faced her most significant challenge yet. The trust's conditions required her to develop a project that would contribute to preventing financial exploitation. Her proposal was ambitious: a comprehensive program helping wealthy families identify and address destructive patterns before they led to crisis. "I've been studying Isabel's failed attempts," Sarah explained during her presentation to the trust's board. She tried to force change through financial restrictions alone. What made Grandma Eleanor's approach different was how she integrated psychological support with practical consequences. "I want to help other families access that wisdom before they need a crisis intervention." The project forced Sarah to confront her own history in new ways. Working with Dr. Foster, she began documenting the subtle signs that had preceded her manipulative behaviors. This process revealed patterns that had been invisible to everyone, including herself, at the time. "It's like looking at a photo negative of my past," she shared during a therapy session. "I can see how each manipulation was really a cry for help. How every scheme was trying to fill an emotional void. If someone had helped me see that earlier, maybe things would have been different." Victoria's presence added another dimension to our understanding. Her own family had experienced both failed and successful attempts at rehabilitation trusts. She shared videos of interviews with family members who had gone through Isabel's early programs, highlighting the crucial differences between mere financial control and true transformation. What Eleanor and Isabel eventually realized, Victoria explained, was that the money itself wasn't the problem or the solution. It was just the medium through which deeper family dynamics expressed themselves. True rehabilitation had to address those underlying patterns. This insight led to a significant expansion of the Foundation's work. Beyond just helping families structure rehabilitation-focused trusts, we began developing early intervention programs. These programs would help wealthy families identify destructive patterns before they reached crisis levels. Sarah's personal journey became an unexpected asset in this work. Her ability to articulate both the manipulator's perspective and the path to recovery made her uniquely qualified to help others recognize warning signs in their own families. During one particularly powerful workshop, Sarah worked with a young woman who reminded her of herself. "I see now what Grandma Eleanor saw in me," she told me later. the pain beneath the manipulation, the desperate need for validation. But I also see what she knew all along, that true validation can only come from facing reality, not escaping it. The Trust's board recognized Sarah's growth by granting her new responsibilities within the foundation. She would help develop protocols for assessing whether families were ready for rehabilitation-focused trust structures. Her own experience helped her identify both genuine commitment to change and subtle forms of resistance. The hardest part of my journey, she explained to a group of family wealth advisors, wasn't facing legal consequences or losing access to money. It was facing myself, really seeing the person I'd become and choosing to be different. Any successful rehabilitation program has to create space for that kind of self-reflection. Victoria's archives also revealed something unexpected: documentation of failed rehabilitation attempts that had actually made family dynamics worse. These cautionary tales helped us refine our approach, ensuring we weren't inadvertently causing harm while trying to help. Eleanor and Isabel learned through trial and error, Victoria noted. They saw how good intentions could backfire without proper understanding of family systems. That's why Eleanor was so meticulous in documenting everything. She wanted others to learn from both their successes and their mistakes. This legacy of careful documentation inspired Sarah to begin recording her own journey in detail. Her personal insights, combined with our grandmother's wisdom and Isabel's historical perspective, would provide future generations with a comprehensive understanding of both the problems and solutions in wealthy family dynamics. 3 generations of women in our family, Sarah reflected, each contributing to understanding how money can either heal or harm. Grandma Eleanor gave me more than a trust structure. She gave me a place in this larger story of transformation. The true test of our grandmother's vision came from an unexpected quarter. A prominent family therapy institute proposed a research study examining the long-term effects of rehabilitation-focused trusts. They wanted to track multiple families over time, comparing outcomes between traditional inheritance structures and our grandmother's model. The foundation would need to decide whether to participate and potentially expose both our successes and failures to academic scrutiny. During the board's deliberation, we discovered another hidden message from Eleanor, this one embedded in a seemingly ordinary book about family wealth. Pressed between its pages was a letter addressed to future generations of problem solvers. If you're reading this, she wrote, you're facing questions about how to share our methods more broadly. Remember that true wisdom grows through examination, not protection. Our approach must evolve through study and critique, not remain frozen in time like a museum piece. The timing of this discovery coincided with Sarah's completion of her official rehabilitation program. Her final evaluation showed remarkable progress, but also revealed something unexpected: areas where our grandmother's model could be improved based on lived experience. The program saved my life, Sarah explained during her exit interview. But there were gaps. Moments when the structure felt too rigid. Times when more flexibility might have actually supported growth better. We shouldn't be afraid to acknowledge these imperfections. Dr. Foster, who had been documenting Sarah's journey, identified a crucial insight. Eleanor Reynolds created a foundation for transformation, not a perfect solution. The real power of her model lies in its ability to adapt while maintaining core principles of accountability and support. This realization led to a significant decision. The foundation would not only participate in the research study, but would actively contribute Sarah's detailed chronicles of her experience. Her unique perspective as someone who had both resisted and ultimately embraced rehabilitation offered valuable insights into how the program could be refined. Looking back, Sarah shared during a research interview, I can see how certain aspects of the trust initially reinforced my manipulation habits. I got better at hiding things because some rules felt arbitrary. But other structures, the therapy requirements, the gradual restoration of privileges based on demonstrated growth, those were transformative. The research team, led by Dr. Amanda Chen, began examining how different families had implemented our grandmother's model. They discovered that success rates varied significantly based on how well families understood and maintained the balance between accountability and support. What's fascinating, Dr. Chen noted, is how Eleanor Reynolds anticipated common implementation mistakes. Her documentation includes specific warnings about ways the model could be distorted into either pure punishment or enabling disguised as rehabilitation. Through this process, we uncovered another layer of our grandmother's foresight. Hidden. Throughout her papers were case studies of failed attempts at family intervention, each annotated with careful analysis of what went wrong and how to avoid similar mistakes. One particularly relevant case involved a family that had tried to implement strict financial controls without the corresponding emotional support structure. The result had been superficial compliance masking deeper resentment, exactly what our grandmother had worked to prevent. Eleanor's genius, Dr. Chen observed, wasn't just in creating the model, but in understanding how it could be misused. She built in safeguards against the very human tendency to oversimplify complex emotional issues into mere behavioral controls. Sarah's role in the research process proved unexpectedly healing. By analyzing her own journey alongside other cases, she gained new insight into her transformation. "I used to think Grandma's recording was just about catching me," she reflected. "Now I see it was about capturing a moment of crisis that could lead to transformation. Not just for me, but for others facing similar struggles." The research also revealed how our grandmother's model had evolved through collaboration with others. Victoria's archives showed early versions that had been refined through practical application and careful observation. This discovery led to an important decision. The foundation would establish a living database of case studies, allowing the model to continue evolving based on real-world experience. "Your grandmother understood that true wisdom is dynamic," Dr. Foster explained during a foundation seminar. "She created a framework that could grow and adapt while maintaining its essential principles. That's why it works. It's alive, not fossilized." This perspective transformed how we viewed our role as stewards of Eleanor's legacy. Instead of simply preserving her methods, we began actively engaging with how they could be improved and adapted for different family situations. Sarah took the lead in developing a new component of the program, a peer support network for family members undergoing rehabilitation. "What I needed most during early recovery," she explained, "was to connect with others who understood both the pull of manipulation and the possibility of change. We can provide that for others." The research study's preliminary findings validated our grandmother's core insights while identifying areas for refinement. Dr. Chen's team found that families who maintained the balance between accountability and support saw significant positive changes, while those who leaned too far toward either control or permissiveness struggled. "Eleanor Reynolds gave us more than a trust model," Dr. Chen concluded in her preliminary report. She provided a framework for understanding how financial resources can either support or hinder personal growth. The key lies not in the specific rules, but in how they create space for genuine transformation. The renovation of our grandmother's garden house into the Foundation's new counseling center was nearly complete when we discovered something extraordinary. Behind a false wall, carefully preserved, was a collection of video recordings dating back to the 1970s. These weren't just family movies. They were therapy sessions our grandmother had conducted with troubled, wealthy families long before she created her trust model. Eleanor was studying family dynamics decades before Sarah's crisis, Dr. Foster observed as we reviewed the footage. She wasn't just responding to a family emergency, she was drawing on years of careful observation and experience. The videos revealed our grandmother's evolution as a family counselor. Early sessions showed traditional approaches to family, wealth problems. But over time, we could see her developing the unique combination of accountability and support that would later define her trust model. One video particularly caught Sarah's attention. It showed a young woman, circa 1982, struggling with issues remarkably similar to her own. "Look at how Grandma handles this," Sarah noted, watching intently. "She's not just addressing the behavior, she's helping the woman understand the emotional patterns driving it." The discovery of these recordings coincided with a crucial milestone in Sarah's journey. Having completed her rehabilitation program, she was now eligible to propose how her portion of the inheritance would be used. Instead of requesting personal access to the funds, she presented a surprising plan to the trust's board. "I want to establish a research fellowship," she explained, standing in the same room where the secret recording had first exposed her deceptions. "These videos show that Grandma spent years studying how wealth affects family dynamics. I want to continue that work, but with a focus on prevention rather than intervention." Her proposal detailed a program that would combine academic research with practical support for families. Using our grandmother's archived observations as a foundation, the fellowship would study how to identify destructive patterns before they led to crisis. "The recording that exposed my behavior wasn't just evidence of wrongdoing," Sarah reflected during her presentation. "It was the culmination of decades of Grandma's work understanding family dysfunction. We have a responsibility to build on that understanding." The trust's board, impressed by Sarah's growth and vision, approved the fellowship with one significant addition. She would serve as its first director. This decision marked a profound transformation. The very inheritance she had once tried to manipulate would now fund her efforts to help others avoid similar patterns. During this period, our parents underwent their own remarkable evolution. After watching several of Eleanor's archived therapy sessions, they began to recognize patterns in their own parenting that had contributed to family dysfunction. "We thought love meant protecting our children from consequences," our mother shared during a foundation workshop. "These videos show how that kind of protection actually prevents growth. Eleanor understood this decades ago, but we weren't ready to hear it." Oh, the counseling center's opening ceremony became an unexpected catalyst for healing. As families who had participated in our grandmother's early therapy sessions learned about the archived videos, many came forward to share their stories of transformation. Margaret Chen, the young woman from the 1982 video, now a successful business leader, offered powerful testimony. "Eleanor Reynolds helped me understand that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in our capacity for growth and genuine connection. That lesson saved my family." The center's first initiative, inspired by our grandmother's archived work, was a preventive counseling program for wealthy families. Unlike traditional financial advising, this program focused on the emotional and psychological aspects of managing family wealth. "Eleanor's videos show how money problems are rarely about money," Dr. Foster explained during the program's launch. "They're about trust, validation, power, and identity. Understanding these underlying dynamics is crucial for preventing crisis." Sarah's personal insights proved invaluable in developing the program curriculum. She could identify subtle warning signs that might escape traditional observation, having lived both sides of the manipulation equation. "In these therapy sessions," she noted, reviewing an archived video, "Grandma wasn't just listening to what people said, she was watching for patterns of behavior that revealed deeper truths. That's what we need to teach families to recognize in themselves." The center's work attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Financial institutions began requesting training for their wealth management teams, recognizing that traditional financial planning often failed to address the human elements of family wealth. What Eleanor Reynolds documented in these sessions, a prominent bank executive observed, was how wealth magnifies existing family dynamics. Without proper understanding and support, even the best financial plans can enable dysfunction rather than promote growth. As the center's influence grew, we discovered yet another layer of our grandmother's foresight. The garden house renovation had revealed a hidden study filled with research materials and annotated case studies. These documents showed how she had systematically analyzed different approaches to family wealth management, ultimately developing her unique rehabilitation-focused model. Your grandmother wasn't just helping individual families, Dr. Foster noted, examining the materials. She was developing a comprehensive understanding of how wealth affects human behavior and relationships. The trust she created for Sarah wasn't just a solution to a family crisis. It was the practical application of decades of research and observation. 3 years after our grandmother's passing, an international conference on family wealth dynamics brought an unexpected opportunity. A Japanese business mogul, Hiroshi Tanaka, approached our foundation with a challenging case. His daughter, May, had orchestrated a complex scheme of financial manipulation strikingly similar to Sarah's past behavior. Instead of seeking punishment, he wanted to implement our grandmother's rehabilitation model. This request forced us to confront a crucial question. Could our grandmother's approach work across different cultural contexts? The Trust's board convened an emergency session to discuss the implications of expanding internationally. During our deliberations, Maria made a remarkable discovery in the mansion's attic. A collection of international correspondence our grandmother had maintained with family wealth advisors around the world. These letters revealed that she had been studying cultural approaches to family wealth and rehabilitation for decades. Eleanor wasn't just creating a Western solution, Dr. Foster observed, reviewing the materials. She was developing principles that could adapt to different cultural frameworks while maintaining their core effectiveness. Sarah, drawing on her own recovery experience, took the lead in adapting the program for the Tanaka family. The specific rules might need to change, she explained during a planning session, but the fundamental principles of accountability with support remain universal. Working with Japanese family therapists, we discovered that many of our grandmother's core insights aligned naturally with traditional Japanese values of family honor and collective responsibility. The challenge was adapting the implementation while preserving the essential balance between consequences and healing. Mai Tanaka's case became a testing ground for this cultural adaptation. Unlike Sarah's situation, where individualistic Western values dominated, Mai's rehabilitation needed to address both personal transformation and the restoration of family harmony. Your grandmother's model is remarkably flexible, noted Dr. Yamamoto, a leading Japanese family therapist consulting on the case. It provides structure while allowing for cultural adaptation. The emphasis on both individual accountability and family healing resonates deeply with our traditional values. The process revealed new dimensions of our grandmother's wisdom. Her international correspondence showed how she had studied various cultural approaches to family conflict resolution, incorporating these insights into her model's foundation. Sarah's work with Mai proved particularly powerful. Despite their different cultural backgrounds, they connected over shared experiences of manipulation and the journey toward authentic living. Their collaboration led to innovative adaptations of the rehabilitation program. In my culture, shame can be either destructive or transformative, Mai shared during a joint session. The program helps channel it toward positive change, rather than deeper deception. That's something both Sarah and I understand deeply. The success of this cultural adaptation opened new possibilities. Families from diverse backgrounds began approaching the foundation, each bringing unique cultural perspectives to the rehabilitation process. Our grandmother's model proved remarkably adaptable while maintaining its core principles. During this period, we uncovered another layer of Eleanor's foresight. Hidden within her international correspondence was a draft manuscript titled Universal: Patterns in Family Wealth Dynamics. The document detailed how different cultures approached similar challenges with inherited wealth. Your grandmother was decades ahead of her time, Dr. Foster noted, studying the manuscript. She recognized that while cultural expressions might differ, the basic patterns of human behavior around wealth remain consistent. The key is adapting the intervention to respect cultural context while addressing universal needs. The Foundation established an international advisory board to guide these cultural adaptations. Sarah's role evolved to include training facilitators from different cultural backgrounds, helping them understand both the universal principles and the need for cultural sensitivity. What makes Grandma's model work, Sarah explained during a training session, isn't the specific rules or structures. It's how it creates space for authentic transformation while respecting individual and cultural dignity. The Tanaka case's success led to partnerships with family therapy institutes across Asia. These collaborations revealed how our grandmother's approach could enhance traditional family reconciliation practices rather than replace them. Eleanor Reynolds understood something profound, Mr. Tanaka observed during a foundation conference. True rehabilitation must honor both universal human needs and cultural values. Her model provides framework while allowing for cultural wisdom to guide implementation. As our international network grew, we discovered that our grandmother had anticipated this global expansion. In her final journal, she wrote, "Family wealth creates similar challenges across cultures, but solutions must respect cultural differences. The model must be firm in principles, but flexible in application." The Foundation's work began influencing international approaches to family wealth management. Banks and financial institutions worldwide started incorporating psychological and cultural considerations into their wealth advisory services. What began as one grandmother's response to family crisis, Dr. Yamamoto reflected, has evolved into a global framework for understanding how wealth affects human behavior across cultures. That's an extraordinary legacy. The 4th anniversary of our grandmother's passing brought an unprecedented challenge. A global economic crisis had devastated many wealthy families, leading to a surge in cases of financial manipulation and family conflict. The Foundation faced mounting pressure to rapidly expand its programs, risking the careful, personalized approach that made our grandmother's model effective. During this critical period, a final hidden message from Eleanor emerged. A maintenance worker discovered a sealed compartment in her desk, triggered by a specific sequence of movements she'd documented in her personal diary. Inside was a letter dated 1 week before her death, addressed, "For times of overwhelming need." "When crisis creates urgent demand," she wrote, "remember that true healing cannot be mass-produced, but wisdom can be multiplied without being diluted if we focus on training healers rather than just treating wounds." This guidance came just as Sarah faced her most significant challenge yet. The Foundation had received simultaneous requests from wealthy families in 12 different countries, all facing similar crises. The pressure to help was immense, but scaling up risked compromising the program's integrity. "I understand now why Grandma spent so much time documenting everything," Sarah reflected during an emergency board meeting. She wasn't just leaving instructions, she was creating a framework for teaching others how to facilitate healing. Working with Dr. Foster and the International Advisory Board, Sarah developed an innovative solution. Instead of directly handling all cases, the Foundation would create an intensive training program for family therapists and wealth advisors, teaching them to implement our grandmother's methods while maintaining their essential principles. Eleanor's model works because it combines universal principles with personalized application, Dr. Foster explained during the program's development. "We need to teach others how to maintain that balance while adapting to specific family situations." The training program revealed new depths to our grandmother's wisdom. Her detailed documentation of both successes and failures provided crucial teaching materials, showing how subtle variations in approach could significantly impact outcomes. One of the first trainees, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez from Brazil, made an insightful observation. Eleanor Reynolds didn't just create a rehabilitation program, she developed a methodology for understanding how wealth affects family dynamics. That's what we need to learn to replicate. The global crisis also brought unexpected allies. Former clients of our grandmother, some from decades ago, emerged to share how her intervention had transformed their families. These stories provided valuable case studies for the training program while demonstrating the long-term effectiveness of her approach. Victoria Reynolds, our Swiss cousin, discovered additional international correspondence in her mother Isabel's archives. These letters revealed how Eleanor and Isabel had already begun developing training protocols for their methods in the 1990s, anticipating the eventual need for expansion. They were thinking generations ahead, Victoria noted, sharing the documents. They understood that the need for this work would grow as global wealth increased, but they were determined to maintain quality through proper training. Sarah's own journey became a crucial teaching tool. Her ability to articulate both the manipulator's perspective and the path to recovery helped trainees understand the psychological nuances of the rehabilitation process. When I was in crisis, the program worked because every person involved understood its principles deeply, she explained during a training session. We're not just teaching techniques, we're passing on a way of understanding human behavior around wealth. The training program's first graduates began implementing the model in their own countries, each adaptation revealing new insights about how cultural contexts affected the rehabilitation process. Weekly video conferences allowed these practitioners to share experiences and refine their approaches. What's remarkable, Dr. Chen observed, is how Eleanor's model actually becomes more robust through thoughtful adaptation. Each cultural context reveals new aspects of its effectiveness while maintaining core principles. Our parents, who had completed their own journey of understanding, took on roles mentoring other parents through the rehabilitation process. Their experience with enabling behavior provided valuable insights for families just beginning to recognize destructive patterns. We thought we were protecting Sarah, our mother shared during a parent training session, but we were actually protecting ourselves from facing difficult truths. Understanding that distinction is crucial for any parent trying to help their child achieve genuine transformation. The foundation established a global network of certified practitioners, each committed to maintaining the delicate balance between accountability and support that characterized our grandmother's approach. Regular audits and peer reviews helped ensure program integrity while allowing for necessary adaptation. Eleanor Reynolds understood something fundamental about human nature, Dr. Rodriguez reflected during an international conference. The path to genuine change requires both firm boundaries and compassionate support. That principle transcends cultural differences while respecting their importance. The global economic crisis, while challenging, ultimately served to validate and strengthen our grandmother's model. As more families faced similar struggles, the expanded training program helped ensure that help remained available without compromising quality. In crisis, people often seek quick fixes, Sarah noted during a foundation review. Grandma's model works because it addresses root causes, not just symptoms. Our job is to maintain that depth while meeting the growing need for help. 5 years after our grandmother's passing, a moment of profound significance arrived. The mansion's East Wing renovation uncovered a time capsule Eleanor had prepared specifically for this anniversary. Unlike her previous messages, this one was addressed to the next generation of healers and contained something unexpected: her personal failures. "Before you read my successes," she wrote, "you must understand my mistakes. Every insight I gained came at the cost of learning what doesn't work. True wisdom includes acknowledging our failures and learning from them." The documents revealed early attempts at family intervention that had backfired, creating deeper rifts instead of healing. Eleanor had meticulously documented these failures, analyzing why each approach had failed and how these lessons shaped her eventual successful model. Sarah, now preparing to publish her own book about recovery from financial manipulation, found these revelations particularly meaningful. Grandma wasn't just leaving us answers, she observed, studying the documents. She was showing us how to keep learning and evolving. Among the papers was a detailed account of a failed intervention from 1975, where Eleanor's rigid approach had driven a troubled heir to attempt suicide. This devastating experience had transformed her understanding of how rehabilitation needed to balance accountability with compassion. That case changed everything, Dr. Foster noted, reviewing the file. You can see how Eleanor's approach shifted afterward, becoming more nuanced in how she combined consequences with support. She learned that breaking someone's defenses wasn't the same as healing them. The time capsule included recordings of Eleanor's private reflections after each failed case. In one particularly poignant entry from 1982, she questioned whether she had the right to intervene in families at all. This crisis of confidence had led her to deeper study of psychology and family systems theory. "I realize now," she recorded, "that the question isn't whether to intervene, but how to do so in a way that preserves dignity while promoting growth. Money magnifies family dynamics, but it doesn't create them. We must address the underlying patterns, not just their financial expressions." This new understanding of Eleanor's journey transformed how the foundation approached its work. Instead of presenting the rehabilitation model as a finished product, we began emphasizing its evolutionary nature. Each new case became an opportunity for learning and refinement. Sarah took the lead in incorporating these insights into the training program. "When I first entered rehabilitation, I saw it as punishment," she shared during a training session. Understanding that the program itself emerged from learning through failure helps others see it as a process of growth rather than judgment. The foundation established a new research initiative dedicated to studying current program failures. Rather than hiding unsuccessful cases, we began analyzing them systematically, following Eleanor's example of learning from mistakes to improve the model. Eleanor's greatest gift wasn't just her successful model, Dr. Chen observed. It was her demonstration of how to learn from failure without being defeated by it. That's particularly relevant when working with wealthy families, where failure is often seen as unacceptable. Our parents, continuing their own growth, began sharing stories of their early mistakes in handling Sarah's behavior. Their honesty about enabling patterns helped other parents recognize and address similar tendencies in their own families. "We thought protecting Sarah from consequences was love," our father shared during a parent workshop. Understanding Eleanor's journey helped us see how our fear of failure was actually preventing growth, both Sarah's and our own. The time capsule also revealed Eleanor's struggles with self-doubt, particularly during Sarah's escalating manipulation. Her private journals showed how she questioned whether her intervention would help or harm, even as she gathered evidence of Sarah's fraud. The recording wasn't just about exposing deception, Dr. Ramirez noted, studying these entries. It was Eleanor's way of ensuring she couldn't back down from necessary action, even when her own emotions made her want to enable rather than confront. This revelation of Eleanor's vulnerability made her strength more inspiring. She hadn't acted from certainty, but from a carefully considered understanding that discomfort was sometimes necessary for growth. Sarah's response to these discoveries showed how far she'd come. "Reading about Grandma's doubts and failures doesn't diminish her in my eyes," she reflected. "It makes her transformation of our family crisis into a force for healing even more remarkable." The foundation incorporated this spirit of honest self-examination into its core principles. New protocols required regular assessment of program effectiveness, with particular attention to cases where the intervention didn't achieve desired outcomes. "Eleanor's legacy isn't just a successful model," Victoria observed during a board meeting. "It's a methodology for continuous learning and adaptation. She showed us that acknowledging failure is crucial for achieving lasting success." The impact of this approach extended beyond wealthy families. Other organizations working with family dynamics began adopting Eleanor's practice of systematic learning from failure. creating a broader culture of honest evaluation and continuous improvement. On the eve of the Foundation's 5th anniversary, an unexpected package arrived from a law firm in London. It contained the last piece of our grandmother's legacy, a collection of letters she had written during her final months, each addressed to different family members and marked to be delivered when they're ready. My letter revealed something profound about Eleanor's motivations. "Catherine," she wrote, "you may think the recording was about exposing Sarah's deception, but it was equally about freeing you from the burden of always being the responsible one. True family healing requires everyone's growth, not just the obvious troublemakers." Sarah's letter contained a revelation that brought her to tears. "By the time you read this," Eleanor had written, "you'll understand that the trust wasn't punishment. It was my way of giving you what I failed to provide earlier. Boundaries with love, consequences with support, and the chance to discover your authentic self." The most surprising letter was addressed to both our parents jointly. "Your enabling of Sarah wasn't just about her," Eleanor wrote. "It was your way of avoiding your own unresolved issues with wealth and responsibility. The trust structure was designed to help you face these truths when you were ready." These final messages arrived just as the Foundation faced its most ambitious challenge yet. A consortium of international family offices had proposed creating a global network of rehabilitation centers based on our grandmother's model. The scale of potential impact was enormous, but so were the risks of diluting the program's essential principles. During our deliberations, Maria discovered one last hidden safe in the mansion's library, concealed behind a panel that only opened when certain books were arranged in a specific order. Inside was a manuscript titled "Beyond Rehabilitation: Creating Sustainable Family Transformation." "This isn't just about helping troubled families," Eleanor had written in the introduction. "It's about changing how we think about wealth's role in human development. Money can be either a barrier to growth or a catalyst for transformation. The difference lies in how we structure its influence." The manuscript detailed Eleanor's vision for a broader cultural shift in how wealthy families approach inheritance and responsibility. She had anticipated the need for systematic change beyond individual family interventions. "Your grandmother wasn't just solving a family problem," Dr. Foster observed, studying the manuscript. "She was developing a framework for transforming how wealth influences human behavior across generations." Sarah, who had completed her own book about recovery, found new meaning in her journey through Eleanor's final writings. "Grandma saw my manipulation as a symptom of a larger pattern in how wealthy families handle power and responsibility," she realized. "The recording wasn't just about catching me, it was about capturing a moment that could catalyze broader change." The Foundation's International Advisory Board convened to study Eleanor's manuscript and integrate its insights into the proposed expansion. Her detailed analysis of how wealth affects family dynamics across cultures proved invaluable in developing protocols for the global centers. "What makes Eleanor's approach unique," noted Dr. Yamamoto during the planning sessions, "is how it addresses both individual behavior and systemic patterns. She understood that sustainable change requires working at both levels simultaneously." The manuscript also revealed Eleanor's thoughts on the future challenges wealthy families would face. She had anticipated how technological changes would create new forms of financial manipulation and family conflict, providing guidance for adapting her principles to emerging situations. Our parents, having completed their own transformative journey, took on leadership roles in developing programs for other parents struggling with enabling behaviors. Their personal experience with both enabling and recovery made them particularly effective advocates for change. "Eleanor didn't just help our family," our mother reflected during a parent workshop. "She created a model for how families can use crisis as a catalyst for positive transformation. That's a legacy that extends far beyond wealth management." The foundation established the Eleanor Reynolds Institute for Family Transformation, dedicated to researching and advancing her vision of systematic change in how families handle wealth and responsibility. The institute would combine academic research with practical application, ensuring that her insights continued to evolve and adapt. Sarah's role evolved to include mentoring other families through their own transformation processes. Her unique perspective as someone who had moved from manipulation to meaningful contribution made her particularly effective at helping others navigate similar journeys. "What I understand now," she shared during a mentoring session, "is that Grandma's recording wasn't an endpoint. It was a beginning." She used that moment of crisis to initiate a process of transformation that continues to ripple outward. As the foundation prepared to launch its global network of centers, we discovered one final message from Eleanor, encrypted in the manuscript's dedication. "To those who will carry this work forward, remember that true transformation isn't about controlling behavior. It's about creating conditions where people choose to grow. Every crisis holds the seed of positive change if we have the wisdom to nurture it properly." 6 years after our grandmother's passing, a moment of profound symmetry occurred. The foundation was hosting its first global conference on family wealth transformation when an urgent message arrived from the renovation team at the mansion. They had discovered something remarkable in our grandmother's old recording studio, a final video, dated the very morning of her last day. The conference hall fell silent as we played the footage. Eleanor appeared on screen, looking tired but purposeful. "If you're watching this," she began, "then everything has unfolded as I hoped. The recording that exposed Sarah's deception wasn't just evidence. It was a catalyst for change I'd spent decades preparing for." She went on to reveal that her intervention in our family crisis had been part of a larger vision. Throughout her life, she had observed how wealth could either strengthen or destroy family bonds. The trust she created wasn't just for Sarah's rehabilitation. It was a prototype for a new way of thinking about family wealth and healing. "Today," she continued, "the final pieces of my research are being sealed in various locations throughout the mansion. Each will be discovered when the time is right, but there's one truth you need to understand now. The greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the wisdom to use resources for growth rather than destruction." As she spoke, Sarah, who was attending the conference as a keynote speaker, suddenly recognized something in the background of the video, a familiar painting that had once hung in her room. She rushed to the mansion, and behind that painting, we found Eleanor's final journal. The Bauzam journal revealed that Eleanor had been diagnosed with a terminal illness 2 years before Sarah's crisis. Instead of simply leaving her wealth to her family, she had used her remaining time to create a comprehensive framework for transformation. "I knew my time was limited," she had written, "but I refused to leave my family with just money. I wanted to leave them with something more valuable, a path to authentic living and meaningful contribution." The global conference became an unexpected celebration of this legacy. Families from around the world shared stories of how Eleanor's model had helped them transform their own crises into opportunities for growth. The ripple effects of her work had extended far beyond our family. Sarah's closing speech at the conference marked a powerful moment of completion. Standing at the podium, she held up the dictaphone that had recorded her deceptions years ago. "This device once captured evidence of who I was," she declared. "Today, it represents who I've become. My grandmother understood that exposure without support leads to shame, but exposure with guidance leads to transformation." The Foundation's work entered a new phase following these revelations. We established the Eleanor Reynolds Legacy Initiative, dedicated to finding and mentoring individuals who showed promise in understanding the complex dynamics of family wealth and healing. During this period, our parents made their own surprising contribution. They had spent years documenting their journey from enabling to understanding, creating a comprehensive guide for other parents struggling with similar challenges. Their work filled a crucial gap in Eleanor's model, addressing the specific needs of parents in wealthy families. "We thought wealth was a shield to protect our children from pain," our father shared during the guide's launch. Eleanor helped us understand that true protection comes from teaching them to handle both success and failure with integrity. The mansion, now fully renovated, became more than just the Foundation's headquarters. Each room where we had discovered Eleanor's hidden messages was preserved as a teaching space, helping new families understand the journey from crisis to transformation. Maria, who had been crucial in preserving and revealing Eleanor's messages, finally shared something she had kept private all these years. "Mrs. Eleanor knew her time was short," she revealed. "She told me, 'Maria, watching over these messages isn't just about preserving evidence. It's about protecting hope. Each revelation will come when the family is ready to receive its wisdom.'" The Foundation's global network of rehabilitation centers began incorporating Eleanor's staged revelation approach, understanding that transformation happens in layers, with each truth building on previous understanding. This methodology proved remarkably effective across different cultures and contexts. Victoria, our Swiss cousin, discovered the final piece of Eleanor's legacy in her mother Isabel's archives, a collaborative manifesto they had written together about the future of family wealth. "Wealth without wisdom destroys," they had written. But wisdom without practical application remains theoretical. True transformation requires both. As I stood in Eleanor's study on the evening of the conference, holding her final journal, I found a handwritten note that perfectly captured her legacy. "The recording that seemed to tear our family apart actually gave us the opportunity to rebuild something stronger. Sometimes, the most loving act is to let truth break down what's false, so something authentic can grow in its place." Sarah joined me in the study, and together we reflected on how far we'd come. "You know what's amazing?" she said softly. "Grandma turned my worst moments into a gift for others. She showed that even our mistakes can serve a greater purpose if we're brave enough to learn from them." On the 7th anniversary of our grandmother's passing, the mansion buzzed with activity as families from around the world gathered for a unique ceremony. The Eleanor Reynolds Foundation was inaugurating a new tradition, the annual Transformation Awards, recognizing individuals who had turned their own family crises into opportunities for widespread positive change. The ceremony took an unexpected turn when a young woman approached the podium during the opening speeches. She introduced herself as Katie Chen, daughter of one of Sarah's former victims. "7 years ago," she began, "my family lost everything to financial manipulation. Today, I'm here to share how that loss became the foundation for something extraordinary." Katie revealed how her family's experience had led her to study Eleanor's methodology. She had gone on to create a youth program helping children from wealthy families develop healthy relationships with money and responsibility before destructive patterns could take root. Eleanor Reynolds understood that prevention is more powerful than intervention, Katie explained. Her work with Sarah showed how to transform crisis into opportunity, but her greater legacy is teaching us how to prevent such crises in the first place. During the ceremony, Sarah received an unexpected delivery, a package from our grandmother's old friend, Judge Patterson, to be opened on this specific date. Inside was a recording device similar to the one that had exposed her deception years ago, but this one contained a very different message. "Sarah." Eleanor's voice emerged from the speaker. "If you're hearing this, you've completed the journey, from exposure to enlightenment. The original recording caught you in deception. This one captures my faith in your transformation. Your greatest contribution won't be in the money you repaid, but in the wisdom you'll share from having walked this path." The package also contained documentation of cases Eleanor had handled decades ago, showing how she had developed her understanding of family wealth dynamics. Among these papers was a series of letters exchanged with international scholars about the psychology of inheritance and responsibility. What Eleanor created wasn't just a rehabilitation program, Dr. Foster observed, reviewing the materials. It was a complete philosophy of how wealth can serve human development rather than hinder it. The recording that exposed Sarah was just one tool in a much larger vision of family transformation. Our parents, who had become respected speakers on family-enabling patterns, shared something they had never revealed before. In the months before her death, Eleanor had worked with them to understand their own childhood experiences with wealth and how these had influenced their enabling behaviors. With Sarah, Eleanor helped us see that our enabling wasn't just about Sarah, our mother explained during the ceremony. It was our way of avoiding our own unresolved issues with money and responsibility. Her intervention wasn't just about saving Sarah, it was about healing generational patterns. The Foundation's work had expanded beyond wealthy families to influence how institutions approach wealth management. Major banks had begun incorporating psychological and family dynamics training into their services, recognizing that financial advice alone wasn't enough to ensure healthy wealth transfer between generations. Maria, who had been a faithful guardian of Eleanor's messages, finally shared her own story. She revealed how Eleanor had helped her overcome her own family's poverty-based trauma, teaching her that both excess and scarcity of money could create destructive patterns if not properly understood. Mrs. Eleanor believed that money is like water, Maria explained. Too much can flood and destroy, too little causes drought and hardship, but the right amount, properly channeled, brings life and growth. Her work was about teaching people to create healthy channels for wealth to flow through families and communities. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a new initiative, the Eleanor Reynolds Institute for Preventive Family Wealth Psychology. This research center would focus on developing early intervention strategies to help families establish healthy wealth dynamics before crisis points emerged. Sarah, who had become a respected authority on financial manipulation recovery, announced her most ambitious project yet, a global educational program teaching financial literacy alongside emotional intelligence and family dynamics. My grandmother's greatest gift wasn't the trust she created for my rehabilitation, Sarah reflected during the announcement. It was showing me that our darkest moments can become catalysts for positive change if we're brave enough to face them honestly and grow from them wisely. As the ceremony ended, I found myself in Eleanor's study, where everything had begun with the discovery of that first recording. On her desk calendar, still preserved from her last day, was a final note. True inheritance isn't in what we leave behind, but in what we help others discover within themselves. The recording was never about exposure, it was about illumination. The Foundation's work continues to evolve, touching lives far beyond what Eleanor might have imagined. Her understanding of how money influences human behavior has become a cornerstone of modern family wealth psychology. But perhaps her most enduring legacy is the demonstration that even our worst moments can become stepping stones to transformation if we approach them with wisdom, courage, and compassion. As I watch new families begin their own journeys of transformation, I'm reminded of something Eleanor wrote in her final journal. The secret recording wasn't really a secret at all. It was a mirror, reflecting truth back to everyone involved. Sometimes we need to see ourselves clearly, even if the vision is painful, before we can begin to change. In the end, the greatest inheritance we can leave is the wisdom to transform our challenges into catalysts for growth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.